Hello, everybody. One of the key properties of a computer is the ability to run iterations. That is, to go in a loop over and over and over and over and over and make decisions along the way. Iterations are key in machine learning. In machine learning, we are reducing an error, improving accuracy, and therefore optimizing a prediction. In this vignette, I'm going to cover some of the key concepts to do iterations in Python. Python relies on a protocol that utilizes iterable objects. And so we're going to cover concepts regarding iterable objects. And as a bonus, for my students that took CEIS 110, we will expand the ideas and the concepts that we learn when we cover for loops and while loops. And I will introduce, for some of you perhaps for the first time, some of the concepts regarding object-oriented Python. Therefore, iterables objects. That's part of a object-oriented strategy applied in Python. So key concepts that we will cover here are iterable and iterator. And then we will go over how for loops use such concepts. So an iterable is a collection like lists, strings, dictionaries, right? That could represent items listed one after another. And they could be used to iterate, to run loops. An iterator, on the other hand, is related to the iterable, but is an object of a class. And it includes a method called next. And many times another method called iter, I-T-E-R. So Python, when a for loop in Python runs, when it's running a loop, is actually implementing or utilizing the properties of an iterator. And it's pulling from an iterable, right, from a list. So you have a list with items, 1, 2, 3, etc., right? It's pulling those items from the list one after another, using the item as part of an iterator object. And such iterator object contains the method next. So it pulls the first item, then the next one, then the next one, then the next one. So that's what we're going to be covering in this vignette. So I'm going to do that with an example. I'm going to use the range function. Range is actually a built-in function in Python, but I'm going to modify it a little bit here. So I'm going to call it inclusive range. And I'll explain that as we run through the example. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to define a class. And the class that I'm going to have here, I'm going to call it the inclusive range iterator, right? So, and by the way, let me just say this, that I'm also saving this code in my GitHub. So go to my Treviso and follow me on GitHub. And there I have a repository called Python. And inside Python, I have Python vignettes folder that you can use, and you can find this code. So let's go back to the class, right? So the class is a class that includes that next method that is required in an iterator. So this class is going to create an iterator. So for those of you that are new to object-oriented Python, right, in class, in CEIS 110, I covered functions, right? So we had a week where we went over functions and we talked about functions. And the functions had a keyword called def, then the function name, then within parentheses, some arguments that are passed to the function. Okay, so in object-oriented is similar in some ways in that we have a keyword, but the keyword is not def for define, rather is class, because we're going to create a class. And then we're going to instantiate an object. Now you heard me say the word instantiation during CEIS 110. You hear me saying that multiple times. I wanted to make a strong point about that because just about everything in Python is object-oriented, right? Even a dictionary is a dictionary is an object of class dict for dictionary, and that means that it carries many methods that you can apply to dictionaries. All right. So here we're going to do that. We're going to define a class, and the class has various methods. In this case, in this particular case, I have 3 methods. All right. So when you create a class that is going to instantiate, when you run it, when you instantiate an object of that class, that object is going to be of class this name. In this particular case, I called it inclusive range iterator. And just let me remind you, range in Python, right? You put in range, it's going to get you back, numbers that have a beginning and an end. So you can say 0, 5. And range is going to bring back 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, but not 5. It excludes the very last number. That is how it works in Python. That is how it's defined. In other languages, they may have something similar, and it may not be that way. But that's how it is in Python. And in Python, we also always begin counting with the number 0. Anyway, so the bottom line is, in range, the built-in function in range does not include the last number. In here, I'm going to implement a range iterator, because range is an iterator. But in this case, I will include the last number. So if I say 0 to 5, I'm going to include all of them. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that's just as an example, including the 5. So I just wanted to make a unique example to explain iterators. The most important thing and aspect that I want to point out here is that inclusive range iterator class has a method called next, and that is required in iterators. Another thing that is a property in Python of an iterator is it may have a stop iteration key command, right? That is called when you want to get out of the iteration. So it's called stop iteration, and I have it right here inside my class. I'm going to show you how this class works in a few seconds, but I'm just pointing to you some of the key aspects of this class. Notice that each of these lines of code within the class and indented inside have def. So now you remember what we did with def in CEIS 110. Def was used to define functions. So a class has multiple or more than one function. We call them methods. You can call them functions. Either way works for me. In general, when we're referring to these functions that are within a class, we call them methods of the class, okay? Methods of class XYZ. Call them methods. We don't use the word functions, but if you use the word function, you'll be just fine, don't worry. Because in fact they are. In fact they are. But, you know, in general, we say We call them methods. Now, notice that these methods also, and I will have another video when I go in detail over object-oriented Python. This video is not that. This video is more about iterators, but as a bonus, I'm introducing object-oriented. The names of these functions, iter, let me go back, init, iter, and next, have two underscores, then the name of the method, and two underscores. Just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. It's something that we will describe and go over in more detail in another video. All right. So this class again has three methods in it. One of them is init, to initiate the iterator. Another one is iter, and it just goes back to itself. It doesn't do much, but I'm going to leave it in there. I'm going to explain it when we go and run through it. And the last one and most important is next. In this particular case, next is going to pull the next value of the iterable that we are passing, or the arguments. You know, in this case, we're passing arguments start and end. We're saying I want to iterate from start to end, and every time it goes through an iteration, it pulls the next item, and when it pulls the next item, it starts counting. And well, first it's going to test if it's reached the end, and if it's reached the end, it will run the code inside the true value, the true side of the if statement, which is the one that comes right next, and it's going to return that next value in the iteration. It counts up to the next value and it returns it. All right. And notice here too that it has a less than or equal to. And the reason for putting in less than or equal to is, in fact, to include the very last value. Once you pass the last value, once the count goes over the last value, then you go, hey, wait a minute, I'm done with the iteration. So once you pass the last value, then the if statement will jump to the else side and will stop the iteration. So the iteration will start and end with the two values that we passed to the iteration. So I'm going to stop the recording here, and I'm going to come right back with another video to keep them under, just over 12 minutes, 12, 13 minutes. We just reached 30 minutes right now. So I'll be right back, and I'll talk to you in a few seconds. Take care.